The gravest strategic error a man can commit in the modern age is not a financial miscalculation, not a career failure, but the conscious decision to tether his sovereignty to the chaotic landscape of contemporary dating. Machiavelli taught us that control is the essence of power, and what greater loss of control is there than willingly submitting your peace, your resources, and your psychological integrity to a system designed for your depletion? We are not talking about finding companionship. We are discussing the calculated risk of entering an institution that has become a liability, a drain, a worst mistake that actively degrades the self-mastery you have fought so hard to achieve. This unmarried man is society's greatest threat. He's 35, successful, standing alone in the center of a bustling family gathering. He has his life perfectly aligned, career thriving, bank account aggressively healthy, a curated circle of friends who respect his boundaries and his ambition. But there is one thing missing, according to the perpetual chorus of judgment and expectation surrounding him. The question, delivered with the forced intimacy of a societal subpoena, is always the same. When are you getting married? Here is what truly distinguishes him. He doesn't recoil. He doesn't invent excuses about not meeting the right person or being too busy. He simply delivers the terrifying truth, the 5 words that shatter the collective illusion: I don't need to. And that response, that sheer declaration of self-sufficiency, doesn't just make people uncomfortable. It makes them intensely, fundamentally afraid. Why does a man who explicitly states he doesn't need marriage or partnership scare the foundations of society so profoundly? Because he is living, breathing proof that the entire narrative you have been sold, the one dictating what constitutes a complete and worthwhile man, is a deliberate lie. Think critically about this programming. From the moment of adolescence, men are force-fed a simple, unambiguous message: get married, settle down, find a wife. This is presented as the apex of achievement, the benchmark of what real men do. But what if this compulsion is not actually rooted in your personal happiness or spiritual growth? What if its sole purpose is to keep you predictable, manageable, and perpetually indebted? The truth, stark and undeniable, is that a married man is a controlled man. He is burdened by prepackaged responsibilities, constrained by mounting bills, and obligated to provide for a unit larger than himself. He cannot execute the Machiavellian strategy of radical contingency. He cannot simply liquidate his assets, quit his job tomorrow, and travel the world pursuing pure self-development or necessary risk. He stays rigidly in line. But the unmarried man who truly, authentically doesn't need marriage, he is dangerous. Not because he harbors resentment towards women or relationships, but precisely because he is sovereign. He is free, and freedom, especially when demonstrated through thriving independence, is the most corrosive and contagious force in a controlled system. When other men witness him achieving peak vitality without being tethered, they are forced to confront dangerous, system-breaking questions. Do I really require this traditional structure? Am I married because I desired an authentic partnership, or because I was relentlessly conditioned to believe I should be? The formidable philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche addressed those rare individuals who discard the values inherited from the collective and dedicate themselves to the creation of their own superior rules. He termed this figure the Übermensch, the Overman. This man does not require external approval or societal validation to feel valuable or justified. Simultaneously, the psychologist Carl Jung discovered through decades of clinical observation that when a man truly faces and integrates all aspects of his psyche, including his shadow, his darker, unsanctioned sides, he becomes psychologically complete on his own. He eliminates the desperate existential need for someone else to make him whole. This man is not anti-marriage. He is emphatically pro-choice. Not the fabricated choice between marrying or being labeled a societal failure, but the genuine, terrifying choice between marrying because it strategically aligns with his abundance, or staying single because he is already complete in his solitude. That genuine choice, born from strength rather than weakness, is the very thing that terrifies a world fundamentally built on your perceived neediness. We are dismantling that narrative, piece by calculated piece. Now, before we delve deeper into the machinery of control, I need to know, from which great city, from which fortress of solitude or urban landscape, are you witnessing this profound psychological dissection? Let me know in the comments exactly where you are focusing your consciousness right now. Here is a realization so shattering, it will reconfigure your perception of your own mind. You have been meticulously programmed to believe you are inherently broken. Analyze the cultural lexicon. Since your earliest memories, what was the ubiquitous, inescapable message? You must find your other half. You are structurally incomplete without a partnership. A real, mature man settles down. I assert to you that this fabricated deficiency is exactly the state they require you to maintain. Nietzsche surgically exposed this mechanism, calling it slave morality. This doctrine dictates that you are inherently deficient, requiring external validation, a relationship, a social role, a provider identity, to achieve wholeness. It is a masterpiece of ideological control. If you internalize the belief that you are incomplete, you will dedicate your entire finite life force to desperately attempting to fill that artificial void. And what is the most strategically convenient form of control? A man relentlessly seeking completion is a man whose behavior can be perfectly predicted and reliably manipulated. The hidden, powerful truth lies within your own psyche. Jung identified a profound energetic component he termed the anima, your inner feminine energy, intuition, emotional depth, relational capacity. Society deliberately instructs you to externalize and project this essential energy onto women, thereby ensuring you never fully develop it yourself. Why? Because the moment you integrate this inner resource, when you face your anima and integrate it into your masculine consciousness, you become psychologically autonomous. You cease requiring anyone else to make you whole. The man who achieves this integration becomes psychologically dangerous. He cannot be shamed into conventional relationships. He cannot be guilted into settling down. And he is immune to manipulation stemming from induced loneliness. Observe the predictable societal backlash when you assert, with genuine conviction, that you do not require a partner to be complete. They become enraged. They grow defensive. They immediately construct a list of reasons why you are flawed, immature, or secretly miserable. What you are witnessing is the visceral defense mechanism of a consciousness, threatened by existential proof of an alternative. If you can achieve completeness without the prescribed external framework, what does that revelation imply about their life choices, their sacrifices, and their dependencies? The liberating fact is this: when you cease desperately seeking external validation, and instead channel that energy into building internal sovereign strength, you fundamentally transform from someone who needs relationships to someone who consciously chooses them. And choice, particularly choice exercised from a position of power, is what they truly fear. Because a man who chooses from strength also possesses the unconditional freedom to walk away when the arrangement ceases to serve his growth. That sovereign exit terrifies a system built entirely on keeping you dependent. Prepare for a secret that will generate justified contempt. Your profound feelings of incompleteness are not organic, they are entirely manufactured. There exists a colossal, multi-trillion-dollar industry complex whose entire profitability depends on maintaining your state of perceived inadequacy without a wife or long-term partner. We can begin with the wedding industry, a global behemoth worth hundreds of billions, but the dependency extends far deeper than ceremony. Real estate conglomerates strategically target couples because joint spending power increases transaction size and frequency. Insurance companies design family plans because married men statistically purchase drastically more coverage. The entire edifice of the consumer economy is meticulously constructed around the foundational assumption that you must provide for someone else, continually upgrading your status markers. Yet here is the paradox. The man who has achieved psychological independence, the man who genuinely doesn't need marriage, instantly sees through this manipulation. He realizes that the vast majority of his aspirational spending, the necessity for the prestige car, the perpetually bigger apartment, the extravagantly expensive dining rituals, was driven purely by the need to perform the role of provider material. It was all performance art, not genuine, authentic desire. Nietzsche discussed the will to power, but not the vulgar power over others. He meant the power over yourself, the ability to define and master your own impulses. When you successfully redirect that immense expenditure of energy, shifting it away from impressing external observers and refocusing it entirely on developing your authentic self, a radical transformation occurs. You instantly cease consuming from a place of chronic insecurity and begin living, breathing, and purchasing from a posture of genuine internal authenticity. Reflect for a moment on the last significant purchase you made. Was the impulse generated by a genuine value alignment, or was it subconsciously driven by the calculation that it would make you appear more attractive, more stable, or more successful to a potential partner? The man who has integrated his psychology, a process Jung called individuation, makes decisions based solely on his actual core values, completely unburdened by manufactured needs. This sovereign behavior is a direct threat to the economic system. If men collectively cease buying commodities primarily to impress women, stop upgrading their lifestyles merely to signal they are excellent providers, and abandon consuming as a method to fill the void of emotional incompleteness, the entire global economy would be forced to violently reorganize itself around what people actually want, instead of what they have been programmed to believe they require. This is why the relentless messaging persists. Your insecurity is the central pillar of their profit margin. Here is the secret truth that most men spend their entire lives fleeing. You possess a profound, potent dark side, and society is terrified of the seismic energy released when you consciously embrace it. Jung named this repressed repository the shadow. This comprises all the necessary parts of yourself you have been relentlessly taught to hide. Your constructive selfishness, your fierce independence, your strategic refusal to conform, and your absolute desire to prioritize your own ascent. The majority of men spend their lives running from these essential aspects of themselves. They often enter marriage, in part, as a performative attempt to prove they are good guys, capable of endless sacrifice for others. But I am telling you now that embracing and integrating your shadow is the non-negotiable key to psychological completeness. The man who successfully rejects the need for marriage has done the one thing most men fear the most. He has faced his dark side with unblinking honesty. He has acknowledged that, yes, he is capable of strategic self-interest. Yes, he values his independence above most external demands. Yes, he is not always willing to sacrifice his trajectory for the comfort of others. And crucially, instead of allowing himself to be paralyzed by shame over these qualities, he has fully integrated them into his functional self. Here is the magnificent outcome. When you cease running from your shadow, you instantly eradicate your need for external validation. You are no longer required to perform goodness or selflessness to prove that you are worthy of love or belonging. You simply are complete. There is another vital piece to this Jungian puzzle: the aforementioned feminine energy within every man. Most uninitiated men project this onto women with the weak belief that she completes me. But when you integrate your anima yourself, you become psychically whole. You no longer require a woman to access your emotional intelligence, your intuitive faculties, or your capacity for nurturing creativity. You have meticulously developed these qualities internally. This profound acceptance is what Nietzsche meant by amor fati, the love of one's entire destiny and nature. You accept your complete, complex nature, including the parts society emphatically told you were wrong or undesirable. When this occurs, an incredible immunity is conferred upon you. You become immune to manipulation. Society cannot shame you into marriage because you are genuinely unashamed of your powerful solitude. They cannot guilt you into ceaseless provision because you feel no guilt about prioritizing your own sovereign development. You have achieved psychological liberation, and that freedom, witnessed by others, is profoundly contagious. They start asking, wait, I can truly be complete and powerful on my own terms? Picture these two archetypes. First, the tamed man, structured, entirely predictable, fundamentally safe. He possesses a 30-year mortgage, a wife, and an inflexible 5-year plan. Nietzsche defined this orderly, controlling force as Apollonian. Second, the wild man, unpredictable, creatively expressive, explosively free. He can liquidate his assets and pivot his career on a whim, taking high-stakes, necessary risks. This force, representing chaos and authentic expression, is Dionysian. Guess which man society universally prefers and demands? The institution of marriage, particularly in its modern form, is structurally designed to turn Dionysian men into Apollonian ones. It acts as a powerful channel, funneling your wild, creative energy into standardized, socially acceptable forms. Your innate creativity is forced into the restrictive box of provision. Your core independence is transformed into inescapable responsibility. But what becomes of the man who refuses this fundamental transformation? He retains his edge. He remains dangerous. Not physically violent, but unpredictably, creatively, and financially free. Ask yourself, can you quit your job tomorrow morning and undertake an indefinite period of travel and research? Can you radically pivot your entire life's mission without needing to consider, coordinate, or negotiate someone else's entrenched needs? Can you access your creative chaos the moment inspiration strikes? If you are conventionally married, the answer is, strategically, almost certainly no. And that loss of agile power is exactly the point of the control mechanism. The unmarried man who has successfully achieved Jung's individuation has done something extraordinary. He has seamlessly integrated both necessary sides of himself. He can be impeccably structured when the situation demands Apollonian control, and utterly wild when Dionysian expression is beneficial. He can be fiercely responsible when required, and strategically rebellious when necessity demands it. He is a respected gentleman at the negotiating table, and a ruthless warrior in business. He is nurturing in friendship and capable of necessary ruthlessness with enemies. He is not trapped in either restrictive extreme. Society fears this powerful integration, because it is impossible to predict or control. The conventionally married man often loses essential access to his Dionysian nature, becoming a purely Apollonian, safe, predictable, and controlled component. But the integrated bachelor, the sovereign self, has meticulously retained his wildness while developing his wisdom. This radical flexibility makes him incredibly powerful. And power that cannot be controlled is power that threatens the entire established system. Here is a question so consequential, it shifts the entire framework. Who, exactly, decreed that marriage was a necessary precondition for a complete life? Really interrogate this belief. When you trace the origin of the rules defining a successful man, where do they ultimately reside? They stem from inherited authority. Your parents, the religious institutions, the omnipresent media. But what if those rules are simply powerful, yet fragile, opinions? Nietzsche's Übermensch is not a superior racial or biological entity. He is a person who possesses the ultimate sovereignty to create his own authentic values instead of merely inheriting outdated ones. The man who has achieved a state where he genuinely doesn't need marriage is living irrefutable proof that this sovereign creation is possible. He is not rejecting marriage because it is inherently wrong. He is rejecting the insidious idea that it is mandatory for his self-actualization. Observe the critical distinction. Most men evaluate marriage using this frame. I should get married because that is what successful men do. But the value-creating sovereign man asks, does this specific relationship or institution strategically serve my authentic development and highest desires? Same subject. Completely different framework born from conscious power. And this self-defined value system is what paralyzes the collective. Because if you can create your own sovereign values around marriage, then what other unquestioned social rules are actually just suggestions waiting to be discarded? Jung's individuation process is fundamentally about becoming authentically who you are, discarding the consensus demands of who society insists you should be. When you complete this process, you gain the clarity to evaluate every single life choice, including partnership, based purely on the metric of your authentic self, rather than the burden of social programming. Imagine if every man applied the ultimate existential test before entering a relationship. Would I willingly choose this exact marriage if I had to live it infinitely, repeating every moment? That is Nietzsche's concept of the eternal recurrence test. Make choices as if you are destined to repeat them for eternity. How many contemporary marriages would withstand that level of scrutiny? The man who doesn't need marriage has already passed this test. He has faced his life honestly and decided, I would rather embrace powerful solitude than settle for anything less than a profoundly genuine, enhancing connection. This is not anti-marriage rhetoric. This is a declaration of sovereign choice. When you encounter a man who has created his own internal values, who lives strictly by his own standards, and measures success only by his own uncompromising metrics, you are witnessing something supremely rare, authentic human freedom. And that freedom is so potent, so attractive, and so fiercely inspiring that it compels everyone else to question the integrity of their own choices. That is precisely why he is labeled dangerous. He isn't actively destroying society. He is revealing through his thriving existence that alternative, sovereign ways of living are powerfully possible. A quick, piercing question. How much of your daily interaction is pure performance? Jung made a profound distinction between the persona, the mask you wear for the world, and your authentic self. Most men spend so much psychic energy performing masculinity, the dutiful provider, the reliable husband, the self-sacrificing partner, that they completely forget what their authentic, sovereign self actually desires. The external persona dictates, real men get married. Real men provide relentlessly. Real men sacrifice their independence for the unit. But what happens when your authentic self wants something radically different? The man who doesn't need marriage has executed the inner work necessary to distinguish these two warring aspects of himself. He has asked the terrifying question, am I living my life, or am I dutifully performing society's script? The vast majority of men enter into relationships solely to fulfill the expectations of the persona. They operate on the assumption, this is what I am supposed to do, but they never pause to ask the fundamental question, is this what I authentically want? The individuated man has navigated what Jung termed the dark night of the soul, periods of profound isolation, painful self-examination, and necessary psychological inventory, experiences that most people frantically avoid through perpetual distraction, endless activity, and continuous relationship cycling. And through that intense psychological darkness, he discovered an undeniable truth. He can achieve powerful completeness without any external validation whatsoever. When was the last time you made a major trajectory-altering life decision based purely on what you wanted, completely divorced from what others expected, hoped for, or demanded? The authentic man operates from his true sovereign desires, not from manufactured needs. He may eventually choose partnership, but that choice will stem from internal strength, not weakness. It will be born of wholeness, not chronic neediness. Everything you were rigidly taught about how life is supposed to function is visibly collapsing. Nietzsche prophetically declared God is dead, not referring to theology, but to the definitive collapse of the traditional authority structures, religion, social custom, the state, that once provided a rigid, immutable script for human life. Nowhere is this decay more visible than in the crumbling foundations of modern marriage. Your grandfather married because he had to. It was a fusion of overwhelming social pressure, economic necessity, and rigid religious obligation. The fundamental choice was eliminated for him. But you, standing here today, are privileged to be part of the first generation that can truly, consciously, choose whether or not to partake. And that radical freedom is exactly what terrifies the social order. Consider the logical consequence. When marriage becomes strategically optional instead of existentially mandatory, when it is a conscious choice stemming from abundance, instead of a necessity born of fear. When men can demonstrably thrive without the traditional unit, everything collapses and reorganizes. The entire social order must be violently rebuilt on completely new, unpredictable assumptions. Jung theorized about the collective unconscious, deep archetypal patterns that make certain behaviors feel inevitable and destined. The archetypal patterns that once made marriage feel like an unchangeable destiny are rapidly dissolving. The man who doesn't need marriage is not only surviving this collapse, he is pioneering new archetypes. He is proving that life can be deeply meaningful, self-directed, and profoundly valuable without traditional external validation. The death of traditional authority in relationships does not signal the death of love. It signals the necessary sovereign birth of conscious choice. When you are no longer driven by unconscious compulsions, scripts written by previous fearful generations, or rote social programming, you are finally free to forge relationships that were structurally impossible under the old system. Relationships based on radical mutual growth instead of desperate mutual dependency. Connections rooted in conscious choice rather than stifling social obligation. Partnerships that strategically enhance your already complete life, instead of attempting to fill your projected void. The unmarried man who has achieved this consciousness is not merely a free agent. He is a prophet of new possibilities. He is not destroying the old world. He is unveiling the terrifying potential of what the new world could become. And that vision of sovereign freedom is so potently attractive that it compels everyone who witnesses it to question every single assumption they hold about relationships. Here is something that will instantly change how you perceive your own potential. Real, undeniable power is not about controlling others. It is about the merciless mastery of the self. Nietzsche's will to power has been drastically misinterpreted. It is not about domination but about the profound process of becoming who you truly are, expressing your authentic nature, and generating your own supreme values. The man who doesn't need marriage has unearthed this sovereign power entirely within himself. Ask yourself which is the stronger position, needing someone to complete a perceived deficiency, or operating from the powerful certainty of being complete in yourself, seeking external validation from observers, or generating your own unshakable sense of worth? Most men attempt to find power through superficial external achievement, the prestigious job, the larger house, the attractive partner. But this is borrowed power, contingent entirely upon things outside your immediate sovereign control. The individuated man has discovered a different source, the immutable power of self-mastery. He has faced the Jungian shadow, all the parts of himself society compelled him to hide, his ambition, his independence, his strategic selfishness. Instead of shamefully hiding these essential qualities, he has integrated them. This uncompromising integration creates genuine, formidable strength, not the compensatory, insecure strength of men trying to prove themselves, but the quiet, impenetrable confidence of someone who knows himself completely. When you achieve this self-mastery, you possess the power to choose relationships from a posture of genuine abundance instead of gnawing scarcity, from wholeness instead of debilitating neediness. You are not desperately seeking someone to complete you. You are already whole enough to choose to share your life with someone who genuinely enhances it. What does it truly mean to be a man in the absence of traditional frameworks? The old rigid definitions are collapsing, and society has failed to provide functional replacements. This structural void creates what psychologists diagnose as an identity crisis. Men adrift, unsure of their necessary role. But here is the incredible resolution. The man who doesn't need marriage has solved this crisis internally. He has discovered that authentic masculinity is not defined by your relationship to others. It is defined by your relationship to yourself. Traditional masculinity defined men through external roles, the provider, the protector. But what happens when you strategically discard those roles? What happens when you realize you don't require the role of a provider to feel valuable, or a protector to feel strong? You uncover a revolutionary truth. Your deepest, most authentic identity exists entirely independently of any social position. Nietzsche termed this, becoming who you are, the sovereign discarding of inherited identities to discover the pure, authentic nature beneath. Jung called it individuation, integrating all necessary aspects of yourself into a coherent, functional whole. The man who completes this arduous process does not require social approval to feel valuable. He defines masculinity through immutable internal qualities, profound strength of character, creative expression, disciplined consciousness, unflinching authenticity, and radical self-mastery. And this is what makes him politically threatening. When men realize they can achieve sovereign completeness without traditional external achievements, they become instantly immune to manipulation tactics predicated on their insecurity. This new, sovereign masculine identity doesn't reject relationships, it fundamentally transforms them. The unmarried man who has achieved this transformation serves as an aggressive model for others trapped in the traditional identity crisis. He proves that the existential crisis of masculinity can only be resolved through inner work, not external acquisition. through self-knowledge, not social validation, through authenticity, not hollow performance. Once you witness this possibility, you realize the question is not, what kind of man should I be? The question is, what kind of sovereign man am I already? This is the ultimate moment of truth. After absorbing this ruthless analysis, after seeing the mechanics of societal manipulation, after understanding the difference between authentic sovereign desire and inherited social programming, what is the next strategic move you will make? The man who doesn't need marriage represents far more than a personal lifestyle choice. He is a potent, living question mark challenging everyone within his orbit. Are you pursuing partnership because you genuinely desire an equal, enhancing connection, or because society expects it? Are you seeking partnership from an internal state of strength and abundance, or from a fear-driven place of chronic neediness? Are you consciously choosing your life or unconsciously performing society's tired script? These are not comfortable questions, but they are the necessary, sovereign ones. The individuated man has cultivated Nietzsche's ultimate ideology, the courage to be uncompromisingly yourself, the unwavering willingness to live strictly according to self-created, authentic values, rather than inherited, obsolete expectations. His authenticity does not demand you adopt his exact choices, but it forcefully challenges you to make conscious choices, instead of unconscious, programmed ones. He demonstrates that marriage, if chosen at all, must be chosen from strength, not weakness, from wholeness, not neediness, from freedom, not suffocating obligation. And here is the powerful, contagious effect. When men begin ruthlessly examining their motivations, questioning the roots of their needs, and discovering their innate capacity for self-completeness, things begin to fundamentally change, not just for the individual, but for the entire relational landscape. Authentic choice forges authentic relationships. Conscious men create conscious partnerships. Whole individuals establish healthy, non-dependent connections. The man who doesn't need marriage is dangerous not because he wishes to destroy society, but because he powerfully reveals society's entire reliance on inauthentic, fear-based choices. His freedom serves as a sovereign call for others to intensely examine their own lives, to ruthlessly distinguish between genuine desires and social programming, and to choose partnership from strength rather than weakness. And this necessary examination, this relentless commitment to psychological sovereignty, will transform the entire landscape of human connection, forging new possibilities for authentic connection rooted in conscious choice rather than unconscious compulsion, authentic desire rather than social programming, and individual sovereignty rather than collective dependency. The question is unavoidable. Are you brave enough? Are you disciplined enough to discover the terrifyingly powerful man you truly are, unburdened by external demands? Your time is the only finite asset you possess. Your sovereign choices are yours alone to make. The issue is not whether you should or shouldn't marry. It is whether you are choosing from your authentic, sovereign self or from society's borrowed script. The man who doesn't need marriage has already made his defiant choice. What is yours? Now, I want to see the affirmation of your new sovereign understanding. In the comments below, write a single, unshakable sentence that defines your commitment to self-mastery and inner wholeness, declaring your independence from the neediness of the collective. Do this now. This action solidifies your commitment. If this deep dive into Nietzsche and Jung has already transformed your understanding of power and choice, affirm that transformation. Hit the like button immediately, demonstrating your resolve to embrace sovereignty. And subscribe to this channel right now, because your subscription is a formal declaration to the algorithm that you demand content focused only on deep self-development and uncompromising truth. You need to prepare, because in part 2 we transition from the philosophical foundation to the ruthless Machiavellian application of these principles, examining exactly why dating modern women is strategically the worst possible mistake a sovereign man can make. And we will reveal the psychological mechanism used to dismantle your hard-won self-mastery. Do not miss the next strategic revelation. Your sovereignty depends on it. The man who has attained self-sovereignty, the bachelor who refuses to accept the default cultural script, is not merely a social anomaly. He is a living, breathing, systemic weakness. His existence reveals the fragility of structures built upon the assumption of male neediness. We have established that society programs men for dependence, the need for a wife, the need for family, the need for external validation to fill a manufactured void. But when this man, the integrated self, looks at the landscape of modern partnership, he performs a cold Machiavellian calculus that reveals modern dating to be, fundamentally, a catastrophic strategic error. Every man watching this has faced the same unavoidable reality. You operate in a world where the rules of attraction, partnership, and commitment have been radically rewritten. They tell you it is about connection, shared values, and growth. But what if that is the polite fiction? What if modern dating is not a quest for partnership, but a high-stakes, asymmetric negotiation where the costs are always borne by the man who dares to believe in the myth of completion. Machiavelli himself warned against relying on the goodwill of others, especially when power dynamics are in play. And make no mistake, the modern relationship landscape is a battlefield of shifting power. We discussed in the previous segment how the self-sufficient unmarried man threatens the societal structure built on male dependence. Now we drill down into the specific mechanism designed to capture that freedom, the architecture of modern dating itself. We are not talking about finding love. We are analyzing the system engineered to capitalize on your manufactured neediness. This is the analysis they do not want you to hear, the one that strips away the romantic facade and reveals the cold, hard calculus of risk and reward. Pay close attention because this segment outlines the greatest strategic blunder a man can make in the 21st century. Before we expose this matrix of control, tell me right now, in the comments below, from what city are you claiming your sovereign truth today? Let us build this map of awareness together. The gravest error an individuated man can make is engaging in the current dating market under the illusion of equilibrium. The reality is a system of radical asymmetry. Machiavelli's fundamental lesson is simple. Never commit yourself to a position where your risk exposure far outweighs your potential return. In the context of modern relationships, the commitment sought from the man, financial, legal, social, and emotional, is an almost unconditional surrender of sovereignty. The unmarried man retains his capital, his time, his optionality, and his capacity for radical self-determination, the Dionysian freedom. The moment he commits, he enters a structural prison. Consider the cost of entry, the sheer expenditure of the persona tax. Modern dating demands the performance of the good provider, or the worthy partner. This is not authenticity. It is the projection of the perfect mask, the persona, designed to appease external expectations. This performance demands immense resources. The constant upgrades in lifestyle, the aggressive pursuit of status symbols, the emotional labor expended in navigating complicated social rituals, all of it is driven by the manufactured need to prove worthiness. The economy thrives on this insecurity. The man is pressured to buy bigger, better, and more frequently, not because he needs it for his own individuation, but because the script demands he demonstrate his capacity to provide for two or more people. This performance, rooted in weakness, is what the system exploits. If you stop performing the persona, the validation stops flowing. Nietzsche often spoke of the danger of resentment, the bitter envy of the strong by the weak, which seeks to tear down genuine value and replace it with a morality that praises weakness. Modern dating, for the man seeking completion, is often an encounter with this structural resentment. The modern woman operating within a society that has radically shifted its incentives is positioned to demand maximum commitment while offering minimum security. She is often seeking not a partner for co-creation, the path of the Übermensch, but an institutional safety net and an emotional validator. The integrated man, the one who has reconciled his shadow and achieved psychological wholeness, is not seeking completion. He is seeking enhancement. But the current market is engineered for the incomplete man. The modern woman, armed with the paradox of choice offered by digital platforms and the legal leverage granted by social policies, is incentivized to maintain high optionality while demanding singular commitment from the man. For the sovereign man, committing to such an arrangement is equivalent to signing a contract where only one party carries the liability. It is strategic madness. Machiavelli would condemn such an act as recklessly entrusting one's fortune to the fickle nature of others. The psychological danger is even greater than the financial risk. Jung's concept of individuation requires the man to integrate his anima, his inner feminine principle, to achieve wholeness. Society tells him to project this anima onto a woman, making her the essential external piece of his puzzle. Modern dating is the ritualistic act of seeking this external completion. But when a man enters the high-stakes, volatile environment of contemporary relationships, he risks massive fragmentation. If the relationship fails, especially under adversarial terms, the man loses not just the partner, but the external container for his own emotional life. He is left psychologically shattered, forced back into the dark night of the soul, not by choice, but by external trauma. The individuated man avoids this structural dependency. He has already done the internal work, and he refuses to project his sacred, internalized feminine energy onto a woman whose loyalty is neither guaranteed nor incentivized by the system. Think about the sheer impossibility of the dating script today. The man is simultaneously required to be the wild, untamed Dionysian, exciting, free, high status, to attract interest, yet immediately forced to transition into the stable, predictable Apollonian, safe, committed provider, to secure commitment. This duality creates a performative schizophrenia. The moment the man successfully performs the commitment, the Apollonian mask, he often loses the very qualities, the wild freedom, the unpredictability, that made him attractive in the first place. This leads to a tragic cycle. The man is sought for his sovereignty, then tamed by the system of commitment, only to find his tame version is no longer desired by the partner who initially sought his power. The sovereign bachelor sees this trap immediately. He recognizes that the system is designed to neuter the Übermensch, the man who creates his own values. The greatest leverage society has over the powerful free man is the promise of intimacy, connection, and social approval. By withholding approval, through shaming the single man, and offering intimacy as a conditional reward, the system compels the Übermensch to compromise his self-created values and regress into the slave morality of seeking external validation. The mistake is not choosing a woman, the mistake is choosing the system of dating that demands the surrender of internal sovereignty as the entry fee. We must apply Nietzsche's test of eternal recurrence to this dilemma. Could the man who has attained completeness, the man who has truly integrated his shadow and achieved individuation, willingly choose to repeat the cycle of modern dating endlessly? The answer is a decisive no. The cost is too high, the structural risk too severe, and the compromise of authenticity too deep. For the self-mastered man, any choice that requires him to diminish his self-created power for temporary, externally controlled pleasure is a poor bargain. He looks at the legal and social framework surrounding commitment, the automatic assumption of shared responsibility, the often punitive consequences of failure, and concludes that the game is rigged against the sovereign self. The modern dating paradigm is predicated on a manufactured scarcity. In a world of infinite choice, genuine emotional connection becomes scarce. This scarcity is monetized, leveraged, and used to drive male performance. Men are driven into a state of perpetual audition, constantly seeking to impress, constantly competing to prove their superior resource capacity. The man who truly possesses the will to power over himself understands that this competition is a distraction from his authentic creative life. His energy should be directed inward, towards self-development, mastery, and value creation, not outward, into the exhausting, insecure performance of attraction. The ultimate betrayal of the self-sovereign man is when he allows the manufactured need for a partner to overwrite his authentic desire for self-actualization. He begins to make decisions, career moves, lifestyle changes, financial investments, not based on his internal values but based on maximizing his attractiveness within the dating market. The fancy apartment, the high-status job, the meticulously curated social media presence, all become elements of the luring performance, a massive energy sink that detracts from the true work of the Übermensch. Jung defined psychological maturity as the ability to endure the tension of the opposites, the tension between the Dionysian impulse, wild freedom, and the Apollonian structure, responsible order. Modern dating, and the ensuing conventional marriage, forces an immediate and often permanent abandonment of the Dionysian chaos, the unpredictable, creative, risk-taking self. The married man, or the man trapped in the dating pursuit, must prioritize safety and predictability for the sake of the relationship. This is why society loves him. He is contained. The unmarried man who has integrated his shadow retains his wildness. He can unleash his creative chaos in business, art, and life, without checking in with an external authority. To choose modern dating is to choose to clip one's own wings in exchange for temporary social warmth. The man who understands Machiavelli knows that if you cannot control the outcome, you must control the input. The modern dating landscape is uncontrollable for the man. He cannot control the partner's incentives, the legal framework, or the cultural narrative. Therefore, the strategic response is to control the input. Self-sufficiency. The mistake is entering a chaotic system from a position of perceived need. The sovereign man enters the world from a position of overflowing abundance, making any choice of partnership a selection from strength, not a plea from weakness. The decision to engage in modern dating, driven by an inherent feeling of incompleteness, is a strategic error of the highest order. It is the voluntary surrender of the sovereignty you have worked so hard to attain. Before you take the next step, before you re-engage with a system designed to exploit your dependency, we require your input. We are forging a community of men who refuse to live by inherited weakness. We need a mantra, a single phrase that captures the spirit of self-mastery and the rejection of this manufactured necessity. Comment below right now with the phrase you believe best defines the sovereign man's declaration. Use the strongest words you possess. This channel is not built on borrowed philosophy. It is built on the shared conviction of those who watch. We are demanding the truth, not asking permission. Therefore, ensure your commitment to this path is absolute. Subscribe to this channel now. Do not delay, because every day you wait is another day you are operating under the illusion of control. Hit that notification bell. We are moving into the final defining phase of this analysis, the phase where we transition from understanding the danger to mastering the response. The next segment will provide the final, inescapable truth about Machiavelli's calculus of connection, revealing the ultimate strategy for navigating this modern landscape without sacrificing your soul. The transformation continues. and you must be present for the next revolution. The greatest deception ever perpetrated upon the modern man is the myth of essential requirement. We have spent countless hours dissecting the philosophy of freedom, the necessary cruelty of self-mastery, and the psychological traps laid by society and the economic machine. But now we arrive at the absolute, uncompromising moment of truth. The mistake is not merely inconvenient. It is the corrosive action of acid upon your sovereignty. It is the voluntary disarmament of the self, a psychological capitulation disguised as romance. The price of engaging in the modern dating market is nothing less than the surrender of your will to power, the very essence of your capacity for greatness. Think about the sheer, unforgivable waste. Machiavelli understood that resources, time, energy, emotional capital, are finite and must be deployed toward maximum strategic advantage. The modern man, seeking validation through commitment to the modern woman, expends these vital resources on a system rigged for mutual failure. He trades his independence, his clarity, and his hard-won solitude for temporary emotional anesthetic and a social badge that is rapidly losing its value. This is not a choice. It is a critical miscalculation in the grand strategy of your life. It is throwing your most potent weapons, your freedom and your self-completeness, onto the bargaining table only to receive a contract built on shifting sands and perpetual negotiation. The moment you commit to the prevailing paradigm, you are forced into the role of the tamed man. Society needs you safe, predictable, and burdened. The modern dating script requires you to amputate the very aspects of your being that make you dangerous, that make you whole. You must suppress your shadow, your necessary selfishness, your ruthless ambition, your creative chaos, because these elements disrupt the required order. You are told to project your anima, your internal feminine wisdom, onto her, instantly making her the key to your completeness, thus guaranteeing your perpetual dependency. This psychological transaction, this fundamental self-betrayal, is why this path is the worst mistake. It's not about finding a partner, it's about choosing psychological castration. This narrative of self-sovereignty is spreading, challenging the old structures of dependency everywhere. Before we finalize this diagnosis, I want to know where this revolution is taking root. This knowledge, this pursuit of the Übermensch, where does it find you right now? Share your city, your location, because we are proving that freedom is a global language, spoken by men who refuse the role of the predictable provider. Now, let us examine the final devastating proof, the collapse of the choice framework. When a man is complete, when he has achieved Jungian individuation, integrating his shadow and his feminine energy, he operates from a position of abundance. He chooses partnership. The man who makes the mistake, however, operates from scarcity. He needs partnership. The mistake lies in trying to build a fortress of self-mastery upon a foundation of neediness. It cannot be done. The modern dating paradigm, fueled by manufactured needs and media programming, fundamentally requires you to remain incomplete. Your value is measured not by your internal consistency, but by your capacity to perform the role of the provider and emotional crutch. When you enter this arena, you agree to these terms. You sacrifice the Dionysian aspect of your nature, your wildness, your creativity, your chaotic power, in favor of the Apollonian mask of order and safety. You become the reliable fixture, the unmovable rock, which is exactly what the system desires. You lose your adaptability, your edge, your capacity for radical change. Nietzsche's test of eternal recurrence serves as the perfect crucible for this mistake. Imagine the reality of your current or potential modern relationship, the inevitable low-grade resentment, the persistent negotiation over control and resources, the required emotional labor that drains your capacity for higher achievement. Now ask yourself with absolute honesty, if you had to repeat this exact cycle, this specific conflict, this precise level of psychological compromise, infinitely, would you choose it? The man who chooses the path of self-sovereignty answers no. He recognizes that the pain of solitude is a finite, productive struggle, while the pain of an inauthentic union is an infinite, destructive spiral. The ultimate Machiavellian calculation is one of leverage. A prince must maintain control over his internal state and his external environment. When you merge your fate with a system designed to strip your leverage by creating codependency, legal complexity, and overwhelming financial responsibility, you are sacrificing control for comfort. And Machiavelli reminds us that comfort is the enemy of power. The mistake of dating modern women when viewed through this lens is a strategic error of massive proportions. You are trading strategic freedom for tactical security, a trade that always leads to defeat in the long run. We must speak plainly about the nature of contemporary feminine energy as a mirror to societal control. The demands placed upon the modern man often require him to become smaller, to apologize for his ambition, to dilute his will to power, to make room for external validation. This dynamic is not about love, it is about domestication. The mistake is accepting domestication when you were born to roam free. The integrated bachelor, the Übermensch, has developed such profound self-respect that he cannot tolerate a relationship that demands the erosion of his hard-won self. His refusal to engage in this destructive dynamic is not bitterness, it is conscious self-preservation. It is the height of his commitment to amor fati, the love of his complete singular and sovereign destiny. When a man achieves true self-mastery, he sheds the slave morality that defined his youth. He stops believing that he is inherently deficient, or that marriage is a necessary prerequisite for value. He realizes that his feelings of incompleteness were manufactured needs, designed by an economic and social system that thrives on his dependence. The mistake is feeding this system by chasing validation within it. The man who walks away, the man who prioritizes his individuation, his career, his personal mission, and his psychological strength, is doing more than just refusing a date. He is actively dismantling the societal expectation that defines masculinity by servitude. He is creating a new masculine template defined by internal metrics: creative output, consciousness, emotional integrity developed internally, and autonomous decision-making. He becomes the living proof that a man can be a provider for his own soul before he is a provider for others, and that this self-provision is the only sustainable source of genuine strength. This transformation creates the final paradox. By refusing to need a partner, the individuated man elevates the potential quality of any future partnership he might choose. He enters relationships from wholeness, not neediness. He seeks a co-creator, not a completer. He seeks enhancement, not psychological repair. But this choice is impossible until the mistake, the pursuit of completion through the modern matrix of dating, is definitively rejected. This is the ultimate choice between performance versus authenticity. Most men are still trapped in the persona, wearing the mask of the good guy who sacrifices his true nature to secure external rewards. The man who refuses the mistake tears off the mask. He accepts the complexity of his character, the necessary isolation that comes with vision, and the occasional ruthlessness required to protect his mission. He lives from his deepest authentic desire, which 9 times out of 10 is not to settle into a prefabricated domestic role, but to express his full, unbridled power in the world. The death of traditional authority in relationships has given us the painful gift of true choice. Your ancestors were constrained by necessity. You are constrained only by your lack of courage to choose differently. The man who understands that dating modern women is the worst mistake you can make is simply the man who has done the math. He has weighed the philosophical costs against the temporary rewards and found the endeavor deeply unprofitable to his spiritual and material sovereignty. His freedom is his wealth. His completeness is his power. And he will not trade that treasure for anything less than a genuine, conscious connection that honors his entire integrated self. This journey of self-mastery is isolating, but it is necessary. You are now standing on the precipice of a new life, a life where your choices are dictated by your sovereign will, not by ancient, collapsing scripts. The time for excuses is over. The moment to choose self-mastery is now. This path demands clarity and a rejection of the confusing language of dependency. We are forging a new lexicon of male self-sovereignty. You will now share the definitive phrase, a short, powerful statement that encapsulates this philosophy of freedom and self-mastery. We are building the manifesto of the complete man. Go into the comments right now and write the phrase that defines your freedom from needing external validation. Your contribution is vital to this community's growth. You must join this growing assembly of men who refuse the path of engineered neediness. You secure your place among those committed to the philosophy of strength by hitting the subscribe button and affirming your commitment with a like on this video. You are not following passively. You are enrolling in the mastery of your own fate. And understand this deeply. What we have discussed today is just the conceptual framework. The most critical piece, the guide to translating this philosophical power into undeniable practical dominance, is already waiting for you. You are about to discover the absolute non-negotiable next step in this progression toward becoming the completely autonomous man. The next vital revelation begins immediately.